It's 1:24 in the morning on March 18th, 1990. A 23-year-old security guard named Rick Abbott is sitting at a desk inside the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, watching a wall of monitors that show empty galleries. The buzzer at the side entrance rings. Two men in Boston police uniforms tell him through the speaker that they're responding to a disturbance call. He buzzes them in. He won't realize for years that this single decision will become the most studied moment in the history of art crime. 81 minutes later, those two men will walk out of the museum carrying $500 million in stolen art, 13 masterpieces, including a Vermeer that's one of only 36 in existence and the only seascape Rembrandt ever painted. 36 years later, every single painting is still missing. Nobody has ever been arrested. The empty frames where the paintings used to hang are still on the walls. This is the story of the largest art theft in American history. Why an FBI agent named the suspects publicly and still couldn't charge anyone. Why the thieves can never be prosecuted, even if they're caught. And why $500 million in masterpieces became, in the words of the agent who hunted them, perfect fugitives. To understand why this heist matters more than just the dollar amount, you have to understand the museum it was stolen from. Isabella Stewart Gardner was one of the wealthiest women in Boston in the late 1800s. She spent decades collecting art across Europe, paintings, sculptures, manuscripts, architectural fragments. By the time she finished, she had assembled one of the most personal and meticulously curated art collections in the world. In 1903, she opened a museum to house it. She designed the building herself in the style of a Venetian palace. She placed every single object, every painting, every chair, every sculpture, exactly where she wanted it. And then she wrote a will that changed everything. In her will, Gardner stipulated that nothing in the museum could ever be moved. Not a painting, not a chair, not a sculpture. Everything had to remain exactly as she left it, forever. This is why, when 13 paintings were stolen from her museum in 1990, the empty frames could not be replaced, could not be moved, and could not be filled with substitutes. They had to stay on the walls, empty. Today, more than 3 decades after the theft, those empty frames are still hanging exactly where Isabella Stewart Gardner placed them. Silent reminders of a crime that nobody can solve. March 17th, 1990, St. Patrick's Day. Boston is one of the most Irish cities in America, and the streets have been packed all day with parades, parties, and bars overflowing into the early hours. Around 12:30 in the morning, several partygoers walking home spot a hatchback parked on Palace Road, about 100 feet from the museum's side entrance. 2 men in police uniforms are sitting inside. The witnesses don't think anything of it. Boston police on a routine patrol. Inside the museum, 2 security guards are working the night shift. Rick Abbott, 23 years old, has worked here as a regular night watchman for some time. Randy Hestand, 25, is on his very first night shift ever. The museum's policy is simple. One guard sits at the security desk monitoring cameras, while the other patrols the galleries with a flashlight and walkie-talkie. They rotate. At 1:24 a.m., the buzzer at the side entrance rings. The 2 men in police uniforms tell Abbott they're responding to a disturbance call. Museum policy requires verifying with dispatch before letting anyone in. Abbott doesn't. Once inside, one of the men asks Abbott if there's anyone else on duty. Abbott confirms he's alone at the desk. That's when the man tells him, "I think you're going to recognize me. Don't you have a warrant out for your arrest?" Abath did have a minor warrant out for an unpaid traffic violation. Startled, he steps away from the security desk, the only place in the museum with a panic button, and walks toward the men. They handcuff him. They handcuff Hestund when he returns from patrol. They lead both guards to the basement and duct tape them to pipes. Then the thieves go upstairs and start cutting paintings from frames. For the next 81 minutes, the two men move through the Gardner Museum like they have a list. They go to the Dutch room first. They take 6 artworks, among them Vermeer's The Concert, one of only 36 known Vermeer paintings in the world, and considered the most valuable unrecovered painting on Earth. They take Rembrandt's The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, the only seascape the Dutch master ever painted in his entire life. They cut both of these masterpieces directly out of their frames with knives, crude, damaging, the type of cuts a professional art handler would never make. Then they walk to the short gallery. They take 5 Degas sketches and a bronze eagle finial from the top of a flagpole. Then to the blue room. They take a single Manet painting called Chez Tortoni, a small portrait of a man in a top hat sitting at a Paris cafe. In total, 13 works of art, combined estimated value at the time of the theft, over $200 million. Combined value today, more than $500 million. They make 2 trips out to their car. They leave the museum at 2:45 a.m. They have been inside for exactly 81 minutes. The museum's motion sensors recorded everything. The guards remained tied to the basement pipes. By the time the morning shift arrived 8 hours later and discovered them, the thieves had a head start that would last forever. By the morning of March 18th, the FBI had taken control of the case. What they found at the scene was almost nothing. The thieves had been careful. They wore gloves. They cut the security camera footage tapes and took them. They left fingerprints, but none that could be definitively linked to anyone outside the museum staff. Forensic teams analyzed every surface, every pipe, every door handle. The thieves had handled the duct tape used to bind the guards. They had carried the paintings. They had walked through the galleries, and yet there was nothing usable. The FBI did know 2 things for certain. The first was the description of the men. One between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches, in his late 30s with a medium build. The other between 6 feet and 6 feet 1 inch, in his early 30s with a heavier build. The second thing they knew, the security guard who let them in was suspicious from minute 1. Rick Abath had violated museum policy by buzzing the men in without verifying with dispatch. He had stepped away from the panic button at the security desk, and he had a minor warrant out for his arrest at the time of the theft. Exactly the warrant the fake officer mentioned to him. Abath maintained his innocence for the next 34 years. He passed a polygraph test. The original FBI agent on the case eventually concluded the guards were too incompetent and foolish to have planned the heist themselves. Rick Abath died in 2024 at age 57. He never wavered from his story. But the original FBI agent didn't have the full picture. The next 20 years would change everything investigators thought they knew about who was really involved that night. Here's where this story stops being about a heist and starts being about a legal system that wasn't built for crimes like this. In American federal law, the statute of limitations on theft of major art is 5 years. 5 years from the date of the crime, federal prosecutors lose the right to charge the original thieves with the actual theft, even if you found the men who walked into the Gardner Museum with confessions in hand after March 18, 1995, they could not be prosecuted for stealing the paintings. The thieves became, in legal terms, untouchable for what they actually did. But the FBI didn't give up, because there's a quirk in the law. The 5-year statute applies to the theft, but possession of stolen property is a separate crime, and that statute does not start counting until the day the stolen property is recovered or transferred, which means anyone holding the paintings today or anyone caught moving them through criminal channels in the last 5 years can still be charged. The original thieves get a free pass for the actual crime, but anyone who's held the art since cannot. This created a strange legal incentive structure. The thieves themselves had nothing to lose by talking. The people who knew what happened to the paintings afterward had everything to lose. So the FBI stopped trying to catch the thieves. They focused on tracking the paintings. They followed leads to a yacht in France, where agents posed as wealthy buyers eating strawberries with suspected Corsican mafia figures. They followed leads to private homes across New England. And in one of the strangest twists in the entire investigation, one of the stolen paintings appeared on basic cable in an episode of the detective show Monk. A painting hanging in the background of one scene looked exactly like Manet's Chez Tortoni, one of the works stolen from the Gardner Museum. A viewer noticed it. The FBI was contacted. For 48 hours, federal agents seriously believed a multi-million-dollar stolen masterpiece had been spotted as a TV show prop. They tracked down the production company. They located the prop. They examined it under expert analysis. It turned out to be a reproduction, a coincidence of art direction. But the fact that the FBI took a TV show prop seriously for 2 days tells you everything about how desperate this case had become. None of it led anywhere. The paintings, in the FBI's words, had become perfect fugitives. But the strangest part of this case isn't who did it. It's what happened to all of them after. In April 2026, retired FBI agent Jeffrey Kelly published a book called 13 Perfect Fugitives. It contains the most detailed account ever published of who he believes did it. Kelly's theory, built over more than 2 decades of investigation, names 2 specific men as the thieves, George Reisfelder and Leonard DiMuzio, both petty criminals connected to a Boston repair shop owned by a man named Carmelo Merlino, a known mob associate. According to Kelly's investigation, Reisfelder's brother, a retired military officer, once visited Reisfelder's apartment after the heist and saw a painting of a man in a top hat hanging above the bed. Years later, when investigators showed the brother an image of Manet's Chez Tortoni, he broke down. He had been looking at the stolen painting all along. When investigators searched Reisfelder's apartment after his death from an overdose in 1991, the painting was gone. And remember Rick Abath, the security guard who buzzed the men in? Jeffrey Kelly believes he wasn't an innocent witness either. According to Kelly's investigation, Abath was connected through Boston's underworld to the same network that produced Reisfelder and DiMuzio. The Merlino crew didn't randomly pick a Sunday night to walk into the Gardner Museum dressed as cops. They knew which guard would be on duty. They knew exactly when to ring the buzzer. The minor warrant that startled Abath into stepping away from the panic button, Kelly believes that was the agreed-upon signal. The moment the fake officer mentioned the warrant, Abath knew the operation was real. He knew to step away. He knew not to push the button. Abath denied this until the day he died in 2024. He passed every polygraph he was given. The original FBI agent on the case never believed he was involved. But Kelly, who had access to 2 decades more evidence than that original agent, believes the buzzer at 1:24 a.m. wasn't a mistake. It was a coordinated signal between three men, and only one of them survived to tell anyone what really happened. This is the pattern. Every man Kelly believes was involved in the heist or connected to its aftermath died before charges could be filed. Robert Donati, another suspect who scoped out the museum years before the theft, was found stabbed to death in 1991, his body left in the trunk of a car. Robert the Cook Gentile, a Hartford gangster who federal prosecutors offered immunity to in exchange for the paintings, refused. He died in 2021 with the paintings still missing. Even with names, even with theories, even with a former FBI agent publishing them publicly in 2026, the case cannot be officially closed. The thieves cannot be prosecuted. The paintings cannot be recovered without the cooperation of someone who knows where they are. And the most likely people who knew are all dead. If you've ever wondered why thieves don't just sell stolen masterpieces on the black market, this case is the answer. The Gardner paintings are too famous. Every major auction house, every legitimate art dealer, and every museum on Earth knows exactly what's missing. Vermeer's The Concert is one of only 36 paintings he ever made. The location of all 36 is documented. Show that painting to any expert anywhere, and they'll know within seconds. The black market for stolen art doesn't work the way movies suggest. There's no shadowy collector willing to pay millions for a painting they can never display. That fantasy doesn't really exist at scale. What actually happens to stolen masterpieces is darker and stranger. They get used as collateral in the criminal underworld. They get traded for drug shipments. They get held as bargaining chips for sentence reductions. They sit in storage units, attics, and behind walls, moved every few years between criminal networks who can't sell them but won't throw them away. The paintings stop being art and start being currency. Currency that's worth $500 million on paper, but cannot be spent. This is the legal and financial trap that defines this entire case. The thieves are immune from prosecution, but can never sell what they took. The art is priceless but unsellable. The owners can never display, transfer, or even acknowledge what they have. The paintings exist somewhere, but in a state where they cannot legally exist anywhere. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum is still open today. Visitors walk through the same galleries Isabella designed in 1903. They see the courtyard, they see the sculptures, they see her preserved arrangements. And on the second floor, in the Dutch room and the short gallery, they see the empty frames. The museum still offers a $10 million reward for information leading to the painting's return, the largest bounty ever offered by a private institution. The reward has been standing for over 3 decades. In 2013, the FBI announced that they knew who was responsible. They declined to name the suspects. In 2026, Jeffrey Kelly named them in his book. Neither announcement led to any arrests, any charges, or any recovered paintings. The thieves Kelly named are dead. The paintings have not been seen by anyone outside their criminal holders since March 18, 1990. And every year the empty frames stay on the walls of the Gardner Museum. They become more valuable, more unsellable, and more permanently attached to the legacy of a woman who died in 1924 and stipulated in her will that nothing in her museum could ever change. The empty frames have, in their own way, become her final exhibit. 13 paintings, $500 million, 36 years. Some things become so valuable they can never be owned again. The Gardner Museum heist is the largest property theft in American history. The men who likely did it are gone. The paintings are still out there, somewhere, being passed between hands that can never sell them, never display them, and never legally claim them. The FBI knows the names. The court system can't use them. The empty frames are still on the walls. Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one. This is Unraveled Media. New breakdowns coming soon.